Hello everybody, I am Lehman Crafton, aka Zorvalachan Less Than Guru, and today I'm continuing with my reviews, and I decided to go ahead and in kind of a second part of my character creation challenge that John Watson gave me. My first day of the character creation challenge, I did basic D&D, so I figured why not go ahead and do a review of my thoughts on basic D&D from the 80s up until around 91. They compiled a bunch of stuff together and made a rules cyclopedia. So I'll kind of show you some things that I still have from that time, as well as some of my thoughts on basic D&D as opposed to AD&D, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which they were separate things at that time. Tons of videos on that, and again, I'm going to give kind of my own view and my own things. I'm not necessarily going to dig deep into mechanics or things like that because there's tons of other content out there that are much more in-depth and probably much more better than what I have. Mars is getting itchy. He's hearing me. He was just basically being a pain in my last character creation video. Yes, you were being a pain. Sorry, but I have to tell the truth. With the Torg character I made for day 2. But I wanted to kind of show you the first. I wasn't into D&D when they had the BX. So the BX system is apparently very lauded by the OSR, Old School Renaissance, tend to go back one edition further in basic edition, and there's lots of Old School Renaissance stuff that you can get out there. Basically, I guess the rules are compiled better and explained better, and they use what they know as the BX, the Basic Expert system. If I'm saying things right, and please comment if I'm not, it went up to and goes in the OSR up to around level 14 or so, which is what the first 2 books of the BECMI, which I'm familiar with, went up to, which would be the first 2 books, basic and the expert boxes. They did come in box sets. My red box and my blue box for the BE of the BECMI, the basic and expert, have fallen apart. I do have the C, which was companion. That is this box, which I still have the box, although on my quick look I'm missing my player book. I only have the DM book, so I'm not sure what's up with that. I probably just need to look harder because I know I had that at one point. But the first books, as I showed with the character creation, were the player manual and the DM manual, player manual. And these on the back, they had a neat little character sheet that you could photocopy and stuff. And this was only kind of for first 3 levels 1 through 3. And basically, instead of AD&D, which had you choose races and you choose character classes, in basic D&D, the races were the character classes when it came to non-humans. So if you were a fighter, a cleric, a thief, or a magic user, you're basically a human. And then if you wanted to be an elf, you're an elf, which is kind of a mix between a fighter and a magic user. And if you were a halfling, you were kind of like a fighter-ish thief. And a dwarf was kind of a fighter with some underground stuff. So they kind of broke things apart like that. And then the second series book, that box set actually only came with the 1 expert rule book. So here you kind of have a red dragon and a person, and here the guys mounted this time, and then it's like each time they get bigger and bigger. So there's the companions. So what happened with this is they went up to level 14, plus they repeated levels 1 through 3. Pretty much. So this was very much for a solo play and just get started, and then you move on to the expert rules, which added more things, and then the companion rules. And even though it's known as basic, if you go online, there's lots of people that talk about how basic D&D, once you started getting higher, wasn't basic anymore, as in necessarily meaning less complex rules. Here, they had rules for mass battles, and you would get stuff like that. But with that expert set, what happened for the second book is they actually included the Isle of Dread, which is, from what I understand, a pretty popular module back in the day. Another module that I have, Death's Ride, which was for pretty higher level characters in the companion, so the C part of BECMI. I never had the Masters, and I never had the Immortals, which would be the M and I part of it. But this adventure actually is one of those ones that I just took the adventure and used it for another gaming system. At the time, I believe it was Adventure Quest Jarn, which was a game that I've said in previous videos that I got at Purdue when I was in their fantasy club, and it was a locally printed, and the club did that specific setting and rule set. But I was easily adapted this right to it. And a couple of other things. These were these 2 huge maps of the world, trail maps, that like would fill that whole wall right there, pretty much so. And then I remember a friend gave this to me. He thought it was an AD&D thing, because sometimes you get those confused, but that was a D&D. And the symbol changed because this is more along the time when they started doing this, the Rules Cyclopedia. This I got very recently, print on demand from Drive-Thru RPG, and it's actually a pretty good book. It's pretty clear. There's just a few areas where the type is kind of maybe a little smudged from when they were converting it to the print on demand format, but this basically does the BECM part. It leaves out the immortal parts, but it does include the basic, expert, companion, and master rules all in one nice volume. I believe it's 36 levels. And then the other thing that I wanted to show was the Hollow World was a part of that original set, which kind of took you below. And there's even a couple of new character classes, races. They had, basically there was less magic inside the world, and so they had like elves that didn't have magic and things like that. So that whole thing here is something that I always had. Like these, you can tell they're originals. I just never game mastered or really played it. I tried a couple of times. I tried a play-by-mail play because I thought the simpler rules without skills and stuff would be easier. That just fell apart because back then it was actually play-by-mail. I'm not talking about play-by-email. I'm saying play-by-mail. You typed up or wrote up, and hopefully when they sent it to me, I could read it. They'd send me what they were doing in mail. Lick the envelope, lick the stamp, put the stamp on, send it in the mail, wait, get the mail. Yes, I had an actual play-by-mail. It didn't last very long at all, but I tried to do that. One time I tried to use this system when I wanted to get away from mechanics, out kind of the metagaming going on. Again, I thought since it was a simple system that I just had people tell me what to do. And I don't know how I convinced him, but I convinced my brother to kind of sit in back of me and make all the rolls for characters and game master stuff. So I was telling the story as a game master, people as players were participating, and he's sitting behind the couch rolling dice and basically tell me if things were succeeding or not so we could focus. Thank you very much, Jason. I cannot believe I talked you into that or could convince you that that was a good idea, because that actually sounds like a really shitty job to give one of your players sit behind me and make the rolls. Oh man, my days of youth, I was trying to come up with ideas and make different things, but luckily that didn't last beyond maybe like a night or two session. There was a time when me and a lot of my players were cycling through games a lot, trying to figure out something we liked. Now, honestly, out of most of the old school D&D, so if I'm talking about AD&D and second edition, first edition, second edition, D&D Basic, I actually prefer the basics. It's weird if you think about it, when these games D&D first came out, they didn't have skills. They expected you to either roll versus attributes, or the game master just to go, okay, here's your background. It's, yeah, you probably can trap some food and stuff like that, maybe, or, you know, roll versus your intelligence to set up the traps, or roll versus, you know, your dexterity to shoot something, and not really worry about the minutia of having skills. And then other games came out that had skills, and then D&D started adding skills as non-weapon proficiencies. And then it just seemed like for a while games had like hundreds and hundreds of skills, to where it was even like redundant or so close, but you would go, but technically that's not really that skill. So you would have things like I mentioned with Palladium, you'd have trapping and hunting. Yeah, they're different. Trappers are not hunters, but in a game world you need that kind of separation. Or sometimes they would be overlapping, like stealth and sneaking, and one would be outside and one would be inside, and just types of things like that. And you get into like games that had hundreds and hundreds of skills, and then all of a sudden the thing was like, streamline, let's streamline things, and all of a sudden you have games that only have 20 or 40 skills, and they get condensed. Or you just go back to the, okay, things are under attributes, which is kind of the, you know, interesting to see that huge kind of starting with nothing, going overboard, and going back to very, very little, is one of those things that is very interesting to me, because it's like during that whole time, like when I was first playing, before I actually game mastered and did this, we didn't worry about skills, and I didn't think about skills. And then once I was introduced to skills, like, it's like, oh wow, this makes sense to me. And then I did that, and I liked those games that had hundreds of skills. And then all of a sudden new school starts coming around with, hey, we're streamlining and let's cut down the skill redundancy and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. So it's kind of like I'm on the bandwagon the entire time. And now, as I've stated in other videos and stuff, I am in that questioning mode of, maybe you look at, what am I trying to accomplish, and from that I can take that system. And as a game master who was there with old school, who was there with changes to new school, who's there with new school, that it's like, if I'm doing certain campaigns, certain things might appeal to me differently than if I was doing something else. If I'm doing a new school type thing, I might do this. If I'm doing a middle school thing and really focused on minutia and stuff, then yes, I would open up 100 skills. But if I'm going old school, then it might just be, do you have the skill or not? Or if I really wanted to go super old school, you know, even though this was a 91 product, it's a compilation of early mid 80s product. So, you know, I can pull out this and not have to worry about skills and just get to the meat and potatoes of the game. And that's something that I'll have to say, even though I don't really like D&D, this is not a horrible system, especially if you want to go to the let's actually role play. And there's the difference between, I'm free-flowing role play, like improv role play, and I feel that I have to nail down every aspect of my character through skills and feats, or whatever the equivalent of feats are in that system, to be able to role play. There is a lot of people that say, this is my character concept, and I must have things that I can nail down, that I can actually point out and say, this skill here makes my character my character. Plus this, you know, perk or feat makes my character my character. It's all this combination of all these little skills and feats and race and blah, blah, blah. Where in this, you just go, I'm an elf. And then you come up with your character and you role play it based off of how you want and how you perceive your character to be. You don't necessarily need to have a skill. You just say, hey, game master, I'm an elf. We're in woods. I'm, you know, a wood elf. Would I know this? And one of the things that I said in my character creation for a day one character in the game master rule book that I thought was really good for old school. Most important rule right here. Most important rule is be fair. Be fair. If a game master is fair, if they don't just put things out there to kill players, or if they don't go the opposite way and make it a cakewalk for players, because sometimes that can be very boring. If you just, I swing the sword, oh it dies, oh it dies. If you're fair, if you make things challenging, if you make players have to figure out what to do, instead of just rolling, oh roll your this, okay here's the information you know, oh roll this skill, okay here's the information. It's like, no, here's a puzzle, you tell me what you're going to do. And they have to say, okay, I'm going to see if there's a mage in town. I'm going to talk to him about those runes to figure out what might be in there. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to study here. I'm going to contact the Thieves Guild. I'm going to, you know, if you're a thief character, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And you bring out your own mind as a character to role play. Yes, and I understand there are the, well, what if my character is smarter than me? What if my character is more charismatic than me? Etc. Yes, I do understand that, but a lot of people really like that. I want to be the character. I want to immerse myself in the world and figure out things. And that's it. If you like that type of thing, then this, the old basic D&D, or if you want to go one further back, the BX and all the OSR stuff that goes with that, it's a really good system to use for that. And when I was coming up with a campaign that ended up as going to be a heavily modified Palladium game, this was one of the choices that I was willing to game master. So even though it's not my favorite system by all means, it's one of my favorite versions of D&D. So I've always said that I had most, except for a 3.0 and beginning basic or beginning advanced Dungeons and Dragons, I have copies of all the basic, at least the basic book of D&D. Third edition, I just never, when it came out, it just never seemed like it was something that I wanted to do, and it kind of stayed that way. I do have Pathfinder, which is based off of it, of course, but the actual D&D I don't have, but I can in some way have played every single version of it. And it was always, I would get the main book a lot of times just because I knew that was the main game that people played. If I wanted to role play and I wanted to role play and they didn't want to play other games, or they had only knew D&D, then I was going to play D&D. And that was one of those things. And I would enjoy those adventures. I wouldn't think about mechanics or things I didn't like. I would just try to find something that I liked and kind of fixated on that. And then I could play and not have a problem, and at least enjoy the plot, enjoy the campaign. So my overall statement for the basic D&D, it is a nice game in my opinion. It is something that if you're looking to be able to pretty quickly make a character and jump into role playing, it's great. Just realize your character is going to start off with very few hit points. If you're like a thief or a wizard, you could die in one hit. Fighters could die in 1 or 2 hits, depending on how many hit points they had. So it is one of those things that you have to go into with a mindset of, I need to be careful. This is not a heroic game, at least at low levels. Now, again, the basic, the BECMI, and the rules cyclopedia based on that, you can go up to like 36 levels, and then you become immortals, which are like gods for the Nistara universe, or the Nistara world. It was called the known world, and then they added that hollow world inside of it. And then like these, you know, they're just talking about Dungeons and Dragons trail maps, and and this world was fully populated by the time. I mean, these were huge maps. And then they finally, well, this one just says Poor Wizard's Almanac. But at one point, and it might have actually been in 2nd edition, they converted that world to 2nd edition AD&D and called it Mystara. So that's what it's known. But it's basically the old basic D&D world, and it's a pretty cool world. They have lots of different things. They'd have what they called gazetteers that were like books that had all the information for a certain kingdom or region, and it had everything from politics to who lives there to creatures to wilderness and things like that. You can just, even if you did not play on Mystara, you could mine that for content. And that's something that I always did. Like I said, this this Death's Ride, completely different system. I took characters through straight out of here because they were both roll 20s, and you wanted to roll high, and weapon damages were about the same, and spell damages were about the same. So I didn't even convert. I just rolled 2 different systems and used the same dice and converted fine. This one is one that was, you might think, pretty funny. I took a mixed, I had basic D&D characters as well as Robotech characters. And I just converted Robotech to only being able to do hit point damage instead of mega damage. And they weren't in their mecha or anything. They were just, got transported to here, and I had them combine and 2 parties meet up and went through this adventure. So it's just stuff that you can do that you don't, there's lots of these old neat little adventures that you could just pick up and mine and put in your own world and stuff like that. So to wrap up, I don't hate this system. It actually has nostalgia for me, even if it's a bad nostalgia that now I can smile and laugh about. But I would be very willing to play or even game master using this book, because everything's in here and I don't have to have lots of books, which I even showed you that I misplaced one of them. So as long as I have this book, I can do things. All the rules are right there. It was not too bad on Drive-Thru RPG to get a print on demand. It got sent to me within a few weeks. And it's, or you can go, if you want to go even one step back, the BX OSR content out there is good for that type of mentality. So if you want to take a step back from new school, if you want to get to where players are the ones thinking, if they're the ones making the decisions, you're not rolling on skills, you just either roll a d20 under an attribute, or you just base it off of different players' backgrounds that you come up with the players. And if it sounds like something reasonable to you, you let them do it, and you don't worry about it, and you move on. So again, I am Lehman Crafton, aka Zor Valachan, Less Than Guru, and until next time.